as much as I do help people with their money, and I know that that helps with those things, I think that wealth really comes in different areas of life. And that's why I think that what I do is just so good, because it helps people, it helps make things easier for people so they can focus on what matters. Because if you're in survival mode all the time, you forget to be grateful. But when finances aren't an issue and your family's okay and everything like that, then you're finally calm, things are going to be okay, and then you can focus on what really matters. So
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Oh My Curry Goodness. My name is Hamza Islam. On each episode of this podcast, I talk to people who are primarily Gen Z across different industries about their story and the experiences that have shaped them into who they are today. I created Oh My Curry Goodness because I want to focus less on the destination of a person and focus more on the journey. And I created this podcast because I really want to know more about what it's like to be a human being from the perspective of the guest. I want to create a podcast that humanizes people rather than focusing on titles, awards, destinations, or whatever. And so I hope that you guys, as listeners, join me in understanding more about people's stories and seeing what they went through. And I hope that in a way it can inspire you. Now, maybe you may not follow the same thing that the guest is doing, but you can in a way take something away that can make you want to start your own business, or as someone who loves curry, make your own curry. While it may not be perfect, it's definitely going to be a destination towards greatness. So continue to check back each and every week to learn from incredible people who are of the Gen Z generation. Now, this week I'm speaking with Madison Vitello, who is a regional leader and financial advisor with Primerica. Primerica is a Fortune 1000 firm listed on the New York Stock Exchange. Started in 1977, its mission is to help families earn more money, become properly protected, debt-free, and financially independent. I have connected with Matt. I've known Madison for about a year, and while we've never met in person, I've met with her at least virtually. She's a really fun person to talk to, and I'm so excited to finally have her on my podcast. So, Madison Vitello, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness.
of course, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Of course, it's so cool because one of the things that, while one of the few things we have in common is that we went to Ohio State. Now I paused right there because I know you left college after a year and a half, whereas me, I'm still in college. So we have that little bit of a connection. So go Bucks in a way, but it's
Right.
always great to connect with fellow Buckeyes, if you will, and more importantly, those who love talking to people because for some reason, communication, while it's very overlooked, it's also something that not many people, in terms of like having genuine conversations, it's not something that we're good at. So I love talking to people that love talking to people, if you will.
I agree. Yeah, I'm the same way. And the first time that we met too, it just seemed like you always have such good intentions, and you are very intentional with your communication and letting me know, because I know you've been trying to get together for a long time, and it's just been crazy for both of us. But yeah, definitely I appreciate that too. And I do love meeting new people. I believe that success ultimately comes from the relationships that you have with people. So talking to everyone, having meaningful conversations with people, and really just being intentional about furthering your connections, I think really takes people far in life.
For sure. And I definitely want to talk more about, or a bit about Ohio State because even though
Mhm.
it was you were there for a year and a half, I'm sure that there's still some things you've learned. But I
Right.
want to start on a more broader scale and talk about something that's really, really important to you. Sure, you are involved with helping people when it comes to their money, but more importantly, one of the things that you told me that is really special to you at the end of the day is helping people, whether that's
Right.
money or out of that area, if you will. And I want to ask you, because I know as cliche of a question as it is for, I'm sure, many people, in your opinion, why is helping people such an important part of what makes you you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think ultimately, like, I believe that a lot of who we are today comes from how we grew up and everything like that, like our past and our experiences and our upbringing. So a big part of that, I believe, was just how I was raised. I think my parents are two of the most selfless people I've ever met and obviously known in my life. They're my heroes, and without them, I definitely would not be in the position that I'm at. I wouldn't be who I am. I think that being surrounded by them kind of had a standard in me to like seek other people that are like that. And honestly, like I feel like the purpose of life, again, like I said, like yes, I teach people about money, and money really does make a huge difference in people's lives, but ultimately I think that there's so much more wealth in life. I think it's more so again about those relationships. It's about having people live with joy, right? I'm very into my faith, and turning people to the creator, whoever that may be, and whatever faith that is for whoever's listening. But in general, it's I believe that's just why we were made as human beings, is to help elevate everyone else and help you to reach the next level, help other people to reach to the next level, whether that be mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever that looks like. So I really just feel like that's been, placed on my heart from my God. And I think that that also came from being nurtured and, everything by my family growing up.
So, one thing I want to mention, and anyone who can tell, because my name is Islam, I am Muslim, and I know that you are Christian, and I don't talk too much about religion just because one, I'm still on that learning process, and secondly, because we have two different religions, so it's going to be different.
Mhm.
But on a broad scale, I totally agree with the fact that faith, in a way, teaches us the importance of helping people and being
Right.
bigger than yourself. I think
Mhm.
I don't know much about Christianity, but like one of the things that in Islam we really try to avoid, or we say like one of the most dangerous types of people is the one that thinks about themselves, the arrogant ones, or think that they're better than everyone else. And so I think that was something that I learned very early on. And so when it comes to faith, I realized that it's not just you. I mean, yes, you have to help yourself. That's obviously true, but there's also this part where it needs to be bigger than you. And so I totally agree with where you're coming from in the sense that, like, when you talk about your connection with faith, it teaches you about being the best version, not just to other, or not just to yourself, but to other people in general. And I don't know if you want to add on to that, but one thing I do want to ask you though, and it's a common question, and if you want to add on to that, go ahead. But there's like when you were talking about, I remember there was one question I would ask a lot of my guests, and I think I asked this one time on Instagram, so I'd love to know your thoughts on this. So there is the idea of helping people and then asking for help. And I'm sure, like you said, you talked about how your parents have meant so much to you, and I'm sure that whenever you need something, you would go to your parents. Which one do you think is more stressful for you? Like, do you think asking for help is stressful or helping people? Because asking for help could be a sense of like, what if it's a stupid question or this level of vulnerability? But then when you're in a position of helping people, it's like you hope that they're in a better place. So I'd love to know your thoughts. And if you want to add on
Yeah.
to my little spiel on faith a little bit, go
Yeah.
ahead. But love to know your thoughts on those two.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So that's a little bit that's a lot of different avenues that you could go down with that. But to your first point, just with faith, you were talking about like being a part of something greater than yourself. And I actually played basketball growing up, and that was like, I believe truly, again, I had a basketball coach who was a mentor, and I really looked up to him and his organization and just how the culture was. And I believe that people feel most fulfilled when they do feel a part of something bigger than themselves. And one thing that I've definitely in points in my life had to humble myself about was that yes, my world is like so much me, and it's hard not to focus just on me. But when you look at the grand scheme, like I am like a little bitty speck in the entire world. And in reality, we kind of all are. We're the little specks that make up the full picture. And when you do look at any type of faith, and I truly I believe that all faiths they're reflections of each other. Um I don't disagree with any faith. I'm not like super strict in any. I'm pretty open-minded in a lot of ways. Yes, I consider myself a Christian, and yes, I believe in the Christian God and everything like that. And I also acknowledge that there are other gods as well, right? So I personally I believe that there's too much out there that could be. I'd much rather be open to it all than, closed off to any one direction. But I think ultimately when you look at any type of faith and you study any type of faith, it is always turning to an idea that there is much more than just us, and that when we focus outward, then we really experience the fullness of life. So kind of transitioning into your other question about, whether I feel like helping other people versus asking for help is more stressful or easier or whatever for me. Personally, I think that I'm much more willing to help other people because, again, kind of going back to my nature, I think I'm very quick to do that. And I've often found, especially being in business for the past couple of years, like trying to figure all that stuff out and, kind of switching careers. So for those of you who don't know, I was studying psychology in college at Ohio State and coming into finance. Those are two different worlds. But obviously making that transition and learning all that it needs to be learned about owning a business and running a firm and training people and everything like that. I do understand that it's a big piece of who I am to want to help other people, and it is also a big responsibility. So there is some stress that comes with that, right? I want people to succeed, especially because I train so many people in our office, and I also think that that's the most fulfilling. That's my favorite part about what I do. When I have someone in our office that's like sitting with me on a presentation or anything like that, and then I see how enlightened they are from learning something new or feeling more capable or, moving forward in any way, I believe that I am fulfilling not only my purpose in my role, but also my purpose as a human being is to increase and elevate and embrace the fullness of life and help other people to do the same. I also have found that, again, in the past 3 or so years, I have had more struggle than I would have hoped to have asking for help. That is a downfall that I've had in the past. And I definitely have learned that over time that it is okay to ask for help because just like I'm trying to help other people, and that increases like my own spiritual energy, or I'm a big into energy person, like, some people are. I really believe that everything's connected, and, when you give, you get. And just like I'm trying to do that for other people are fulfilled in that same way, helping me. So I forget that sometimes, and that's definitely a reminder that I have to kind of put in the forefront sometimes just to go back to because it's something that not everybody recognizes and not everybody focuses on, and there's probably some people out there like me that get stressed out asking for help. So I'm like, no, I should be capable, and things like that. But we're all human beings, we all have our shortfalls, and that's where the rest of humanity is meant to fill in. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I always overthink a lot whether I'm helping someone or I'm asking for help. I do probably more overthinking asking for help because I'm always thinking, what is the worst possible thing that can happen? And I always remind myself that there's two things. Number one, my intention is just to ask for help. I'm not trying to be a pest or some sort of bother. It's just my intention is, hey, listen, I need help with something, and it looks like you have the credentials or the knowledge, so I'd love for you to help me. And then the second thing that helps me with my overthinking is, have I ever felt this in the past, and how has it normally been? And I would say 9 times out of 10, I'm not ready to say 9.99, but 9 times out of 10, the worst possible thing never happens. Like usually if I'm asking for help, they're willing to help me, or they'll delegate, or they'll say, I can't help you in this way, but it's never personal. And so that was something that took a while for me to understand because I used to personalize everything. But then after a while, again, there are some bad apples. Don't get me wrong. We'll face that all the time.
Right.
But more often than not, there are also good apples, and it's okay to feel that, but at the same time, the worst possible thing can usually never happens unless you make it. Like if I'm asking you for help and I'm thinking if I'm being a pest, the only way I can actually be a pest is if I'm literally being a pest towards you. I don't know. I feel like I
Mhm.
just repeated the same word 5 times
I know
within
what you mean,
30
though.
seconds,
It is
but
about the intentionality, right? And that's what I kind of mentioned initially. Like you were very intentional about your words and your contact and just the questions that you ask and everything like that. Like I would never see you as a pest ever, and you can be sure of that moving forward too. I just and even some people who have good intentions, they're afraid of something, and then because of that, it's like the what's it called? Like the reaffirming bias where, you're afraid of something and then you see it or it happens just because you've been thinking about it so much. So I forget what that's called, but like self-affirming, whether you're going to be a pest, just acknowledge that it's a possibility, but trust in that if you have good intentions, other people normally can feel that and they can know and discern whether you are or not.
I want to transition now to a bit about Ohio State because, like you mentioned, you were a psychology major. Another thing that I found out, and this was something that I had to like go deep, like I had to do some deep research. I found that you were a valedictorian in your high school. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Was, yes.
Oh, see, look at me, go me doing research.
I know. I was like, where'd you find that from?
One of the things that I would love to know is going to college, especially a school like Ohio State. It's a pretty big school, and I mean, people often say like smart people go there. First of all, anybody, not anybody, but like Ohio State can accept a lot of people. But as a valedictorian, before I talk more about Ohio State, as a valedictorian in high school and then leaving college a year and a half in, tell me a bit about what that experience or transition was like because people like the common thing, and I also will plead guilty to this. I used to think that just because you're a valedictorian, that means you're going to do really great things. First of all, that's yeah, Madison's doing great. Madison's doing great. It's like the sense of like, you're going to do great. You're going to have all the success. You're going to make lots of money. And yet, here you are from valedictorian to leaving college a year and a half to pursue helping your family's business. I think the idea of dropping out of college, despite the success you had in high school, is like, wait, what's going on here? Is that the right move? So tell me a bit about what that experience was like, because I mean, even though you're really good at the things that you do for a reason, there's also the sense of like this, the idea of dropping out can sometimes be, there's like a stigma around that idea, especially when you go to a school like Ohio State, for example.
Yes, yes. So thank you for that question. I've never actually been asked this specifically, but you're right. There's a lot of stigma around college in general and dropping out in general. I think that those, depending on which group you're in, whether you're a college student or a college graduate or you got your PhD, or someone who's really successful in business and never went to college, like there's two very opposing views on what that looks like and what's important and everything like that. From a very young age, I've been surrounded by entrepreneurs my entire life. I didn't really know that growing up. I think I was just, I thought that I was actually being surrounded by normal people that, and they are normal people, but they're awesome people. And, I'm not trying to put that down at all. I think that I just was in a basically I was surrounded by people who were always focused on growth. That's what entrepreneurs do. They focus on where to be next. You too, you know that with your podcast, you're just always looking for how to be better. And I think that that is what really instilled in my heart that that is what I'm supposed to do on a daily basis is just how can I do my best? Like my mom would always say, do your best and have fun on a daily basis. Just do your best and have fun. And if I did my best and I had fun on a daily basis and I came home, my parents were going to be happy. I was going to be happy. It was a great day no matter what happened during that day. Everybody's best looks different, but because I focused only every day on doing my best and having a good time, I and I was taught that again by the people who live free lives now because they own businesses and everything like that. I not only loved my life, I loved every single day. I made connections. I just had a great attitude. And that's what I, developed growing up. And I also just knew that I had more to give. And I always did more because my best is more. Like even, this, I know I have a little bit more in me and I would always push myself. So never in my life did I ever like focus on becoming a valedictorian really like in that way. Like, yes, I thought about it. I was like, oh, this would be cool. And if I were to get there, like I would have to do XYZ. But actually the story about my high school is it came down to like the last week of school. And um I was actually number two in the school. And they like ran all the numbers and I was supposed to be the salutatorian. And then like a week before graduation, I get this call from the person who was supposed to be the valedictorian, who most graciously deserves it. Like honestly, like I have no idea why it was me, but he's like a genius. His name is Scott. Shout out Scott. He he just should have been a valedictorian for sure. But he gave me a call and he said, "Congratulations." I was like, "For what?" And he's like, "Well, they just ran the numbers again and you're the new valedictorian." I was like, "Whoa, that's like crazy." So it wasn't really an expected thing. It wasn't something that I really shot for. But because I had those values of doing your best, having fun, making each day a great day, no bad days, only, hard moments and things like that. I think that's what really pushed me to be in that position. And even, I'm not sure, I have a speech somewhere, if you look it up, like that maybe something that you saw or watched or whatever, to know that I was the valedictorian. But in my speech, like to me, it wasn't that I was the valedictorian. It was just the things that I did that got me there. And ultimately, like personally, like it's a blessing that it was, I was a valedictorian and everything like that, but I really think that other people deserved it more because they were more focused on it. I just think God is good. So the second thing that's kind of funny is my little brother's also the valedictorian of his school when he graduated. So we have two valedictorians in the family, and my older brother, never went to college. So he never went to college. I was the valedictorian. I was a dropout of Ohio State, and then my little brother just started at Kent State, and we were like joking because he just started in the family business too. We're like, we can't have two dropouts too. We need to have somebody graduate, right? So, that's kind of cool, and I think that also that is because of the values that were instilled in him and everything like that. So ultimately, like, yes, seeing valedictorian versus dropout, that's a big shift for a lot of people. And it's also kind of funny because I left Ohio State. I dropped out with a 4.0 GPA there and like 20 credits from graduating. So ultimately, it was just a decision of, will I use this degree? I'm very blessed. My parents helped me through that stage of my life for a year and a half, right? They helped me through college, and I'm very grateful that that had happened, because had I not gone to Ohio State, I would never have gotten connected with you. I wouldn't have made a lot of the best friends that I have today, and I really believe that everything happens for a reason. I always talk with my friends about everything is always working out for us, right? Everything's always, moving forward in the exact divine way that it should. And I think, like, dropping out, I don't really consider myself a dropout per se. Like, yes, I do. And the people that I work with, they're like, "Oh yeah, good for you. You dropped out." And the people that, are at school, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you dropped out." So that's kind of what I was saying about the two opposing groups. But ultimately, I think that education, I truly value education, obviously. Like, I believe that one of my strengths is learning. I love to learn. I think it's important to learn. I have thought about going back, like not necessarily for a degree, because ultimately the degree I was getting was psychology. I couldn't have done anything with that degree, right? A bachelor's degree in psychology nowadays, unfortunately, it breaks my heart. You can't do very much with it. You got to go on and get your master's or your PhD to do it. So ultimately, like, growing up, kind of knew that I wanted to be in business for myself. College was just kind of supplementing that and fulfilling that love of learning. Um, and then when I left school, I've thought about wanting to learn more. We have a lot of learning in our business still. There's a lot of different avenues with it. But ultimately, I do think that people should do what's best for them. And if it's college, great. If it's not college, great. Because, I mean, I love learning, and I seek every single way that I can. College is just the most traditional way of doing it. And I also really value being in business for myself and doing good for people in a way that's free to me and that I can be the creator, and I'm not really stuck following someone else's, path that they have laid out for me. So that's kind of my take on that. I'm not sure if that directly answered what you were looking for, but
Yeah, that does. And first of all, I just love doing research on people. I mean, I know that sounds like I'm stalking them,
no, no,
but
I
I'm
get
not
it.
stalking. It's like, oh, we found this information. Great, let's ask her. And I know I didn't send that to you, but I'm
Mhm.
someone who likes to surprise people at times.
Yeah,
Uh, now, I know that Ohio State, as great of a school as it is educationally, sometimes, and one of the things I said in the beginning was like how certain experiences can still help people. So it's almost like, picture this, like I don't know if you've ever, there's always those medical commercials where it's like before and then after, like before I took this medicine I look like this, and then
yeah.
after I take this I look like this. I want to know, even though you were there for a year and a half, what would you say was like, what would you say Madison was in terms of like a person before Ohio State, And then even though you were there for a year and a half, what did Madison look like after Ohio State? So for example, what I will say, and I think we had the discussion when we first met, but it's been a long time and I don't want to like quote you on anything, but
Right.
like when I was at Ohio State, before Ohio State, I used to welcome a lot of people into my friend circle, which is not a bad thing because I'm someone who's willing to talk to people. But then when it comes to like who you want to surround yourself with, you meet a lot of people that are great on a broad scale, but then maybe the things that they do in terms of their activities may not align with your values. So I'm not the type of person that likes to be around people who drink a lot or who like to curse a lot. Some you see sometimes at Ohio State they do love to party too much, like excessive partying. So it's like, okay, now we gotta decrease that circle a bit, and you if you will. And so I'm someone who used to value like thousands of friends, but now at Ohio State I'm more like, okay, let me focus less on quantity and focus more on quality of friends. And that was something that I didn't realize the importance of until college. So that was one of the things that Ohio State has helped me in terms of like my social life, for example. And obviously that's one aspect, but I'd love to know from you personally, despite being there for a year and a half, what would you say was like Madison before Ohio State, and then what was Madison now? What was Madison like, or what did Madison get after that year and a half at Ohio State?
Right. Yeah, that's very true, and I completely agree with you on that. I think that that's something that, again, being surrounded by people that are more so focused on the progress versus the, you know, yes, living in the now, but not like exploiting that now, with partying and things like that. And to each their own. People do their own lives, and I have no judgment over that. That is not my place to even say anything about. And I, at the same time, I also agree with you. I think that, I'm not sure if you've ever heard the saying, but if you're around five people that are XYZ, you're going to be the sixth. It's just about having a circle of people that truly make you feel seen, make you feel heard, make you feel connected, that value the same things, or at least respect your values in that way. Because that is definitely something that I felt like I struggled with a little bit, was just finding my place and finding my people. And that's also a reason that I did leave. It wasn't necessarily because of a specific situation or a specific person or, anything like that. It was, I'm just, over that period of time, I realized who I really wanted to spend my time with. And, instead of trying to spread myself thin, nurturing a bunch of different relationships that I thought meant something to me, even though they were a little bit more shallow. I focused more on the 4 or 5 or 6 girls that I spent most of my time with at school. And then from a couple in my classes and everything like that. So that same lesson was learned over that period of time. And now I'm just so grateful because I am still connected with those people that I built relationships with at school. And I'm also finding more people that are very well aligned with my views and the projection and the vision that I have for my own life. So that was probably one of the biggest things for me as well, was just finding my place. Um, I think also I had like an epiphany about what I wanted my life to look like. Because again, growing up, I think that because I was surrounded by people that are just constantly so uplifting and everything like that, like being in, playing basketball with a team and being in such leadership roles in high school, and, being at the top of my class, and also having my family and the business that we go on, and, that the mentors that my parents have and everything like that, just always surrounding myself with people like you who are just constantly seeking to better relationships and help other people and just increase the impact that they have in their lives. I always knew that I wanted that to be my life. I always knew that those are my values, that's where I wanted to be and everything like that. And going to college, that was a little bit different. Like you mentioned, people have different views on life. And I feel like growing up, I was kind of in a bubble because I did surround myself in high school. I was always in the accelerated program. So I was kind of just naturally put in with those people. And then when I got to college, it was a little bit of a shift where I then had to seek those people out. So I think I learned over that period of time that I thought I wanted to just be with the crowd, because that's what it always was my crowd was always my people. But then going to school, it's like, now I want to be with the crowd, but wait a minute, that's not really the crowd that I thought I was looking for. So that was definitely a realization about what do I actually value? What do I actually want to stand for? How do I actually want to be viewed by people? What's my mission and my purpose in life? Like, where do I see myself in the grand scheme of things in 5, 10 years, 15 years, 30 years from now when I'm on my deathbed? Do I always want to be with the crowd, or do I want to be developing and nurturing the relationships and really finding a sense of purpose outside of what I'm placed in order to, make that difference and, stuff in the way that I really feel like I would like to. So I think that was probably my biggest learning point, outside of, finding your people and everything like that. But there's numerous other lessons that I've learned in that time. And I am so grateful that I did get to go. And again, I truly believe there was a reason that I went.
Yeah, and like you said, everything happens for a reason, right? So definitely. Now, I want to ask you this. Now, I do like this is sometimes like a really, really personal question. So if you don't want to talk too much into it, it's totally fine. But I would love to know when it comes to dropping out of Ohio State, where would you rank that in terms of the most difficult decision you made in your life? And if that is not the most difficult decision, I would love to know. And this is where I'm like, okay, if you don't want to answer this question, I'm totally fine with it. If dropping out of Ohio State was not the most difficult decision in your life, if that's not the case, what was the most difficult decision you made? And how did you know that during that time, as difficult as it was the right decision for you at the end or at that time?
Hmm, a really good question. I don't know. I don't think I've ever like reflected on that per se. Um, Dropping out was definitely a big decision, and there were parts of me that like initially like regretted it. Like when you always like second guess something, oh, I should have bought that thing, or maybe I shouldn't have bought that thing, or maybe I should have done that, or talked to them, or maybe not talked to them, or done something differently. That's just the way that our brain goes in those cycles of, oh my gosh, what would have happened? Um, so I do think that there was some resentment for myself. Like, did I make the right decision? Like, what am I really missing out on? I think that overcoming the FOMO, like I've had FOMO for like too long, I think. And like that's one thing that I'm healing in myself, is like feeling like I do need to be a part of that thing, the thing that everybody's doing at all the time. But again, like I mentioned, like going through and learning more about myself and what I value, I realized that I'm never going to be in a position that isn't going to either teach me or going to help me progress forward, and that I'm never missing out on something that's really meant for me. Like, again, everything's always working out. So it was a big decision to make. I think that ultimately, like, I don't really see it as like a, like absolute, in the moment, I would probably say that yes, that's one of the biggest decisions I've had to make, was saying, do I stay or do I go? Because that was, and I don't even want to say difficult, but it was the most uncertain thing. And it wasn't the decision itself that was like so overwhelming. It was the what comes next. Like, if I continue here and I'm spending thousands of dollars on a degree I know for sure I'm not going to use, but I'm doing something that I love and I'm part with the crowd and I'm with my friends and I'm not missing out on XYZ and like blah, 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 whatever my brain was saying. It was like going that route, right? Always going to the furthest worst case scenario. I'm missing out on all of this versus staying home and saving the money. But again, now what am I missing out on? And now I have all this responsibility of like taking over the family's business. And what does that look like moving back home after being away for a year and a half? Like, what's that dynamic going to look like? And how am I really going to, me moving forward? Is this the right decision? Or maybe would I have used the degree? So it wasn't necessarily like the decision itself, because it was like a quick decision, like, okay, I guess I'm like saving this money. But I think, and I guess, I mean, you could say that it is a huge decision too. Um, but I think it was more so being torn by the fact of what I thought I was going to be missing out on, or maybe not going in the path. But that is definitely a way that I've grown as a person in the past, year or so, is figuring out what, again really matters to me, and how I truly value like being present and like understanding and trusting in the way of the universe and everything like that, and how everything plays out as it should. And I'm always going to meet the people that I'm supposed to be meeting. And if I don't meet them, then it was never meant for me. Or if it doesn't happen, it was never meant for me. And still, just being so intuitive, that's definitely something that I've gotten much better at, and that I'm still working towards, is how can I be more intuitive and listen to what is my heart actually saying versus talking or thinking about like what everybody else doing, which is what I've pretty much done my whole life. So um, I think that that was a huge decision for me. I think that there have probably been some other decisions in my lifetime, but that was definitely the most recent. And ultimately, like in hindsight, I realized that it was also my biggest blessing. I realized that I'm now redirected and on the path that really aligns with my vision. And I couldn't see that before because I was so anxious about being with everybody else. And again, like I'm sure there's people that are listening that really have struggled with things like that, about the what if I miss this, what if it goes this way, and things like that. But something I've learned is, instead of going the what if the negative route, go the what if the positive route. What if this leads to everything I want? What if, in the future a new opportunity comes and now I'm free from school to be able to accept it, or things like that. So it's kind of just a shift in perspective, and again, just trusting in it, even if it's not tough, but also understanding what is in my control. Is my control is just because my parents were helping me with it. It was my control to take that, kind of burden away from them, especially because it wasn't going to give me the return that I thought that it would have been. And now just doing my best and having fun every day as much as I can, just like I was taught growing up. So,
Yeah, I will say this because I know I told you that I'm starting another year in college, and I'm in my fifth year. And the reason why I'd say if you had asked me what's the biggest decision I've made, it's taking a fifth year because as someone who comes from a South Asian background, I don't know why, like growing up in the community that I was in, we kind of compared people like Pokemon cards. So it's like my son did this, my daughter did this, my son and daughter are doing this. And so some of my friends lately were just either graduated on time or graduated early. And so for me, I'm taking an extra year, and it feels like if you take an extra year that you feel like you're stupid or that you're not as quick enough or quick enough to understand. And I think how I knew that at the end of the day, even though that I'm taking this route or journey, how I knew I was doing the right thing, I think it was just the idea of representation in the sense of I'm seeing other people take fifth years. I've heard stories of other people taking fifth years. Some of my friends who I went to high school with, who I'm still close with and are really smart, they're taking a fifth year. So there's a sense of like, phew, I'm not the only one. And I think that term, phew, I'm not the only one, is one of the best sighs of relief. Now, obviously, you still gotta like execute and do everything you need, but that I guess that first step of realizing that you're not the only one who's doing thing or going through something or feeling a certain way, it makes you realize that okay, maybe it's not as bad as it is. And I guess to go back to something that you said in the beginning, everything happens for a reason. And like you just said recently, instead of looking at it as a what if negative, look at it as a what if positive, and seeing that it can be a difficult decision, but also a blessing. So that's why that's what came to mind when it was like, what's like the most difficult decision? Because I know that these decisions can be really personal. So I was like, don't worry, I'll answer this question for you so that we have like I guess something to build on, and not just being like, okay, this is just for you, and then we're gonna move on.
yeah, yeah, that I agree with you. And just like you were saying with, when people feel like they're a part of something greater, when kind of going back to our faith conversation and God, and how we're all kind of connected in that way. When people feel like they're not alone, because we're never alone. We think that we're going through things that are unique to us, but in reality, and it feels big, and that's so valid, but in reality it repeats itself in generations, and it repeats itself in cycles, and in your own lifetime it'll happen again and again and again. And that's okay. And it's okay, because everybody goes through things like that, and you're not alone, and you will never be alone. And when you feel like you can relate, and that you see other people who have gone through something similar, and they've overcome it, and they've been victorious in so many different ways, like you can see then how strong you know that you can be too. And I agree completely. And I know that you weren't trying to make me like feel any, type of way by asking that question, but I appreciate that you also gave your own account of it because it is a big decision. And a lot of people probably are also going through similar things and they're deciding about whether to stay in college or whether to go do something that feels more, you know, uh, clear on their heart, and maybe they're staying in school just because somebody tells them that they should, or maybe they are not going to school because someone tells them that they should. And I think that it's more so about listening to yourself and trusting. And when you truly trust and it's something that you want, then you are willing to make those steps and do it anyway. I think that that's an important thing, is just listen to yourself, acknowledge it, figure out how to do it, and do it anyway. It doesn't matter. It's your life. And, if people have their opinions, they will about anything. And, that's for them to deal with it, not you.
I want to transition into the things that you're doing now slash future. And I know that one of the things that after dropping out, you were working for your family's business. So I'd love for you to talk about your family's business. And then secondly, because knowing that family means so much to you, I want to ask you another common question, which is, even though you're working with your family and it's such an important part, tell me a bit about the pressure you kind of put on yourself when it comes to helping the family business. Because wherever we work, we want to be the best version, but there's also the part where when you're working with family, because of the fact that you grew up together and knowing it's such an important part, if you ignore the business side, like knowing that like family means so much to you, that you want to make sure that you do everything you can, because I think if you letting the business down, it's one thing letting the business down, but because it's a family business, it also feels like you're also letting your family down. So love for you to talk about that, and also if you want to your family business.
Yeah, yeah. So, like you mentioned, I work for Primerica. My parents have been doing this for a very long time. They actually started an organization in 1996 or something like that. So about 28 years, I think that's the calculation. So almost 3 decades, longer than I've been alive. I'm considered a Primerica kid. So I'm the second generation taking over their business, and they actually just recently got promoted to senior vice president, which is awesome. We're located in the Northeast Ohio area. My mom oversees like ish offices now. So a lot of different branches of the business. Our business is called Vitello and Associates Incorporated. And now my older brother actually just came out of, or not just, but he came right out of high school and he started taking over the business. He knew from the get-go that he wanted to, take it over and be an advisor and, things like that. His name's Austin. I had a little bit rockier of a route, as we just talked about, but here I am, and I'm fully licensed now. And now our little brother, who just started in the business, who's also going to Ken, his name is Alex. He is also helping with that transition. So we basically, like you mentioned, help people become properly protected, which deals with life insurance, debt free, which is like debt stacking and things like that, refinancing with mortgages, and become financially independent. That's pretty much retirement planning, building generational wealth, things like that. We also have a bunch of other referral programs, and I know I sound like I'm giving you a presentation right now, and things like that, but I really think what sets us apart then from other industry or other companies in the industry is that we always lead with education, and we are a very relational business, right? I'm never going to give a client of mine an 800 number to call. They have my personal phone number, every single one of them. And it's, again, more of a one-on-one conversation. And because we are word of mouth referrals, like, we are kind of more so inclined to do a great job, because it's hard to stay in business for 30 years like my parents have, doing a poor job for people through word of mouth referrals. So that's kind of what I love. And again, I mentioned that I studied psychology in school. I consider myself a people person, not a numbers person. I'm not, math was probably like my least favorite subject, calculus and statistics. Like, it was great, I love to learn, but I like more so the science side of things, and like even like literature and like things like that. So more conceptual based and more the creative side versus like inputting data and stuff like that. So I love that our business kind of takes both pieces and puts them together. And I love that our business is focusing on freedom in both aspects, whether that means making more money and, fulfilling a shortfall, versus becoming financially independent, just making alterations for someone's financial, position at this point. And what I also really love about what we do is we actually offer people the opportunity to make up a shortfall that they might have. So I was actually just talking with somebody that I knew, and she was surprised that I do all the things that I do with like all the different licenses that we have, like mortgages and investments and insurance and all that stuff, because a lot of our business is focused on like recruiting. And a big part of it, the reason for that is because so many people nowadays, number one, they're underserved, right? You'd agree that middle America is like the least educated about finances, which like breaks my heart because I mean, how many people do you know who use money, right? So everybody needs the education. Did you ever actually have like a class on finance at all?
I've taken a few classes.
Couple.
Yeah.
Okay, do you like still use it to your life?
Um, every now and then. I mean, there's a couple of classes I'm taking this semester that's helpful, but I'll probably learn more about it as the semester goes on.
Okay. So they are implementing certain practical applications of like how money works and stuff like that. But I never got a class like that. My parents never got a class like that. They don't really teach that stuff in school. I know they had like a personal finance course that my brother took, but I think like all he learned was like how to write a check, and we're transitioning away from that now. Fill in the gaps that people have. And when people are at a shortfall, the thing is that not everyone has a spending problem. A lot more people have an income problem, because if people are limited to like a $20 an hour type of thing, and no matter what they do, they'd have to work double or maybe even triple to even keep up with inflation sometimes, right? There's only so many hours in a week. So what we do is we actually provide an opportunity to supplement income, because I actually just met with a client who's at like a $2,000 a month shortfall or so. And, to me, that's a little bit concerning. But then I said, you know what, if I taught you how to do this and I educated you about, what you could do with your time outside, kind of like a hustle, like a side hustle, a side thing that they could work with us part-time, and they could make up that shortfall so that their family isn't struggling financially, they could become financially independent. That really, they were like, that would make a huge difference for us, right? What we could do with that money. So just to answer that question, I really love what we do. And our family's been, again, doing this for a very long time, and I never really knew what my parents did until I started doing it. And I'm very blessed now that I have the knowledge, at such a young age, to be able to then transfer that generational wealth to my kids and my friends' kids. We have a saying, friends don't let friends retire broke. So I'm excited about being able to help my own friends with that as well. So that's that one part of the question. Second part of the question, to answer that, is you hit the nail on the head, right? I'm one that holds myself to very high standards, and I'm sure you do too, and a lot of people do, right? They always want to do the best that they can. And when family, especially when you have a good relationship with your family and you love your family and you want to do the best for your family, when they play a part into that, that pressure is like that much more. So I think one thing that we've definitely gotten better at, and that I've definitely gotten better at, that I think was a struggle in the beginning, is compartmentalization. Because ultimately, when you have a business that incorporates professional conversations as well as like family conversations, personal conversations, and things like that, it's like when you are at family dinner, you shouldn't be talking about business. And when you're in the office, family stuff can wait. So it's about keeping those two things separate so they don't intermingle. And then when your mom does something that you maybe don't agree with, or your brothers are like being mean with you, you don't translate that and the business is affected too. So I think that keeping the two things separately, and that's what a lot of great leaders do, is they say, you know what, business and family, keep them separate. They both matter a lot, and it's God, family, business. Like that's a lot of the, philosophies of the people in our business, is you always put God first no matter what, and then family comes first and then business. But keeping all of those two things, or all of those three things, separate, and also focusing on them when the time is supposed to be for them, right? When it's dedicated for them. So having your time for God, having your time with your family, and then also spending your time with your business, but putting things on the shelf. If a family matter comes up when I'm at the office, let's put it on the shelf and let's revisit it when we're at home, and things like that. So for myself, that was definitely probably one of my biggest struggles. Is I knew that I I'm very capable, and I know that I'm capable, and I believe in myself to my core that this I'm going to take this thing so far, and I'm going to make my family proud. And at the same time, I am also the type of person where I'm like, okay, why am I not there yet? I know I'm going to be there, but why not yet? Right. And I know it's a process, and kind of reminding myself that it is a process. And because I'm young, and because, the circumstances are the way that they are and everything like that, it takes time to develop that, especially coming right out of, psychology and like learning the ropes of the business. And there's so many different hats that we wear. And taking that stress off of my parents, that's a big, deal for me to be able to do. And again, when I came into the business, I was very much so like, I want to be able to do this. And I also want to make my family proud. It just drains me and it burns me out. And then it's a cycle of like, okay, one step forward today, I'm good. It's more about consistency than intensity. Same thing with working out. If you work out once a week and you like burn yourself out, you're not going to want to work out again that week, and you're not going to get the same results as if you do a little bit each day and you get a little bit better each day doing it. So like, I think that giving myself grace, giving our family grace, knowing that again it's going to come. Like, none of us had the inclination or the thought that my parents were going to be promoted to senior vice president like last week. None of us saw it coming. Like, zero. My dad was like, I just got this email. My mom was like, how did this happen? So it's like, that's what I mean. It's like, if you focus on the right things and you do the right things and you have good intentions, just like, kind of coming full circle with the conversation we've had today. It's like, if you do the right things every day, the good will come. And you just have to trust that, not as you thought it would be. It's like trusting that everything is exactly as it should be. And when you trust in that, you relieve your own tension, you become calm, you become at peace, and you find joy in what you're doing in the journey versus just trying to reach a destination.
Absolutely. A couple of questions before I let you go. The first thing is I want to talk a little bit about the future because I know helping people is something that you're very passionate about. It's instilled in you. But what are some other things that, whether it's with the family business or maybe outside of the family business, you would like to accomplish or you would love to do at some point? And it can be anything. Like you can say, I would love to compete in the Olympics. It can be that, or it could be whatever it is. But like, what are some things you would hope to do at some point in the future, regardless if it's family business or not?
Yeah, that's awesome. So I am a very ambitious person, and I have a lot that I want to do. I want to see the world. I believe that Ohio is too small to be able to stick here forever. I'm not sure where I want to live for sure yet. My boyfriend is from Tennessee, so we just went down there. I've been to like 28 or 27 some different states right now. I want to go to Europe. I want to go to Asia. I want to go to Africa. I want to see all the different places of the world, because I believe that, we're all on, the biggest creation that it has life. And I think taking advantage of this, I love food, so being able to try a bunch of different foods is great, right? So I think that that's something too. I've also, growing up, I've been very into podcasts as well. So I've considered also hosting one. So maybe if I start one, I'd love to have you on as well, or vice versa. But I truly really respect what you're doing, and I admire it a lot because that has been a dream of mine as well. I also want to open like a coffee shop one day, maybe something like that, or do something with real estate. I think that there's so many other opportunities that are out there. Especially, I have a lot of friends who are in real estate and real estate investing, and being able to have that mark. I do think that my mission ultimately is to help other people become inspired that they can do more. I think that ultimately, people feel so limited. And because I was in psychology, and I kind of think what got me into that is that I always knew that I had the mission of making people feel loved and knowing that they are loved, and that anything's possible and that we are all capable. And so many people get caught in the thinking that it's not possible for them because of XYZ. But my reminder to people is that anything's possible. So I think starting some sort of foundation that really helps people progress in that way has been a dream of mine. And I truly feel like that is ultimately what my goal is in life, is just to have impact on people, as many people as possible, and just really show that God is here, and we're all we're all on the same journey and we're all here to help each other. And ultimately, when we do make the transition, that we've lived the fullest life that we can. So finding joy and peace and freedom and, love in every single day and every single moment. And I really think that however I can have that impact is what I'm seeking. And I'm always open to anything. If you, there are any other podcasters out there, please, I love to learn. I love that I'm learning about you through this process as well. And, just making connections and seeing how I really can make that difference for other people, I think is, one of my biggest goals. And then obviously well, not obviously, but I want a family. I want to be a mom. I want to be a wife. I want to be, someone who really just like, I think nurturing other people is like my passion and my purpose. So I think that, when I have that for myself, I'll really be more fulfilled. And, that's always been a dream too.
Uh, two more questions. This one, I don't know if you don't want to answer this one, it's totally fine. But because you are someone who loves to help people with their money, love to know your thoughts on this. How do you define what a rich person is? Is it mostly, or is it solely based on how much money they have, or is there something, or are there more elements slash ingredients that it's not just about money, it's more that makes a person rich?
Question. And yeah, I think, like I mentioned, I never thought I was going to be in finance. Frankly, I didn't even know my family was in finance. I knew that they helped people and whatever. So because my parents were always focused on the right things, putting people first 100% of the time, like I really, that's the indication for myself that that's what mattered. So I never really grew up thinking that I wanted to become rich. Like I know that I'm going to, and I know that wealth is coming, but ultimately, like if I never had another dollar, if I focused on my relationships, if I focused on being present, if I focused on really having impact and giving to others, if I focused on, being in nature and really experiencing life fully and taking in as much as I can from each moment and really just, being able to experience each aspect of life. I think that's what makes us rich. I think our ability to really, as creators of our life, do anything that we want. I think that's the richness is like taking control and using your power of choice is richness. And I think that being able to give to others, that's wealth. And there's just so many different things. And I think a lot of us take for granted sometimes what that looks like, what actual wealth is, because there is this big stigma about if you don't have the most updated thing, if you're not following all the trends, if you're not XYZ, if you don't have this car or this house or whatever, you're not rich or whatever. I think people wrongly interpret that that's what wealth is because I mean you can read articles. There's a lot of people who have all those things and they're hurting inside. They're sad, they're miserable, they're not living full lives. They're just upset that they made the decisions that they made in their lifetimes. But in reality, every single morning I thank God that I got to wake up. I think that's a blessing. And I think more so focusing on what do I have versus what am I trying to get. Again, I know you don't want to make this too like biblical or anything like that. I truly believe that, whoever our God is really wants us to be in the moment. I think that there's a verse in the Bible that says, be still and know that I'm God. And basically, I remind myself of that all the time is wherever I think I'm going to go, whatever I think I'm going to do, none of it matters if I don't have right now. So being able to take advantage fully of what this moment looks like and what I do have in this moment, the beautiful relationships, the family, the friendships, the food, the clothes, the breathable air, the car that I get to drive, the food, everything. I think really that's what makes people rich. And when we forget that is when we feel like we're not rich, but constantly reminding yourself that what really makes us rich is what we already have, our eyes, our heart, our lungs that get to breathe, our feet for walking. Because there's so many people that don't have that we take it for granted. And truly, as much as I do help people with their money, and I know that that helps with those things, I think that wealth really comes in different areas of life. And that's why I think that what I do is just so good because it helps people, it helps make things easier for people so they can focus on what matters. Because if you're in survival mode all the time, you forget to be grateful. But when finances aren't an issue and your family's okay and everything like that, then you're finally calm. Things are going to be okay, and then you can focus on what really matters. So that's a good question, though.
Thank you. Last question is somewhat philosophical, but I mean it's one of my favorite questions. I could talk to you every day, and or actually, let me put it this way. I think it's very easy because of social media. It's easy to look at someone and think you have an idea based on what they're posting. Or it's also somewhat easy based on like if you talk to a person, they might be able to share some things that they're up to, but they share a part of their story, but they don't show maybe always like they don't always show like the biggest thing, like the things that they're really going through. I don't know how to, I'm trying to make this, I don't know, I'm overthinking this, but I would love to know, it's kind of philosophical, but what I'm guessing I'm trying to say is like you can spend time with a person as much as you can, but ultimately there's some things you don't know about a person because we just don't usually have that space to share our biggest challenges. So my philosophical question is, what is the hardest thing about being Madison Vitello?
It's very philosophical. Um, I think the hardest thing is that I also like I kind of touched on this throughout the time that we've been talking is I think that I feel like I am different than I am perceived. And I think people perceive me in a way that is positive, and they look at me in a way that I'm an inspiration and things like that. And sometimes I think the hardest thing about that is because I sometimes I don't believe it. And that really that puts me in a place that's not very helpful and not very loving, not very kind. And I think just constantly the battle is to remind myself that there's a reason that they're saying those things. There's a reason that they look at me and they view me in a certain way, or whatever it may be. I think differently about myself because of those standards. Oh, I'm not where I should be, or I'm bad because I did this, or whatever. It's like guilt or shame, or whatever those feelings may be, anxiety. It's the want to have those things be aligned, where I see what people are saying and I truly believe it. And that's the journey I think for everybody is like, well, at least I can't speak for everybody. That's the journey for myself. And that's the journey that learning to love myself as I am, learning to know that I am loved as I am, and that I don't need to do anything else to be or feel loved. I think that's the hardest battle, and that's what we're still working forward to. And ultimately, if there's nothing else I achieve in life, if that's what I achieve, then that's then I've lived my life, and I'm grateful for that. So I think to answer your question, like I would probably say that I hope to feel as good as I'm viewed by other people. And yeah, I think that's ultimately my goal and my mission and purpose, and the journey that we're all on in life.
Yeah, well, you are an incredible person. I just want to let you know that. But yeah, it was a great, it was, I really love I know it's a difficult question. It's kind of a weird question, but again, it's one of those human moments. So,
Right.
Madison, Madison, I just want to say thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness. It was so great talking to you. I kind of knew that was going to be the case because I do love talking to you. So, thank you so much for a great conversation, and I hope we get to meet in person one day. It's always great to connect with people that, like I said, love talking to other people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a blessing. I'm very grateful that we finally got a chance to get together and everything. And if there's anything else that you need ever, please feel free to reach out. I'll always be here.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support this podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.